All right, welcome back to another episode of the Black Bullion Show. Is there a silver shortage? I will answer that question very shortly, but before we begin, just have to say if you're new to this channel, please hit the subscribe button down below, the nice red rectangle there, and also please hit the like button to help get this economic evangelism out there to the masses. Now, also, before I begin, I have to shout out Super Dad 2006 for sparking the topic of this video. So, as you can see here on the screen, we are talking about shortages throughout history of bullion. So in history, we have had bullion shortages, specifically with silver in Europe. So during the Middle Ages, and during the time of the Black Death, mining production suffered, and while demand for silver in trade with the Middle East and Far East exacerbated the shortage, shortages and deficits have also occurred in recent memory. And you guys might be familiar with this, with David Morgan of the Morgan Report. And if you're familiar with his take on this, then you should know what to expect. I'm actually going to be providing both sides to this argument, but I'm going to be starting with David Morgan's side of the argument for the shortage. So he recently did this interview here. I'll leave the link in the description for you to check it out and hear it from his own voice. But I was able to find a transcript from this specific interview. And he was specifically asked the question, are we still in a deficit in terms of silver production? David Morgan answered this, and I'm going to read it. This quick quote. He says, "One of the most misunderstood things about silver is that there is a silver shortage. And the facts are very simple. Between 1990 and 2006, we were in a silver deficit, which means we used more silver than we produced. We had about 2 billion ounces of investment-grade silver in commercial bar form. From 1990 to 2006, a period of 16 years, demand ate about 1.5 billion ounces of silver, which means the above-ground supply was at 500 million ounces, which was in 2006. From 2006 until the present day, and this interview was done about in 2017, we have been rebuilding inventories of silver, and now we're back to about 2 billion ounces, counting both commercial bars and coins. So when people say that we're in a silver deficit, what it means is that there's a deficit between what is mined and what is demanded from monetary and industrial sources on a yearly basis. But what they don't tell you, or what perhaps people don't understand, is that if you add in recycled silver, which is around 160 million ounces a year, silver inventories are actually increasing, not decreasing. Some of it ends up in landfill, but not all of it. A lot of silver is recycled. So if you add in all sources of silver, it's bigger than all demand, which means it's building up the supply. We've now built it back up to the 1990 levels of about 2 billion ounces. Now, I know a lot of you want to essentially throw your laptops at the wall right now after I read that quick quote from David Morgan. But let's take a look exactly at what he was referring to. And the numbers that he used in this interview came straight from the Silver Institute. Now, the Silver Institute is an organization that compiles all of this info on mining supply and demand. So let's take a look at some of the data here. So this is from a range from 2011 to 2020. And you can take a look here, and you can see at the very top, you have a section all dedicated to the supply. And it's divided in between mine production, recycling, net hedging supply, net official sector sales. And most of the supply, surprise, surprise, comes from mine production. Second up is recycling. And if you take a look here, let's just take a look at 2017, which was around the time when David Morgan was giving that interview. Mine production was at 863, recycling was at 167.7, and that totals the supply of essentially 1 billion. Take a look at the demand below. Now, all of the demand here totals about 964.7 million ounces. So if you remove actually all of the other supply variables except for mine production is only 863 million, whereas the total demand for silver is 964.7. Now, there are many people who question some of these numbers aside from the mine production numbers. So yes, David Morgan is correct in stating that, mining production by itself cannot sustain total demand. However, recycled inventory, for the most part, can make up for this. So David, also argues that at the, lowest point in supply that we had in 2006, we should have also had a spike in price. But that didn't occur until 5 years later, as more inventory had been added to the silver supply in 2011. So this essentially is one side of the argument, one side of the debate here, which is essentially there is no silver deficit right now. And even if there was a silver deficit, it won't impact prices. That is David Morgan's argument. So what about the other side of the argument? Well, we have people like Keith Neumeyer. And in this interview, specifically titled, "Is There a Deficit for Silver?" CEO weighs in with Kitco News. He was point blank asked about the deficit. And, I'll read a quick quote from his interview with Daniela. And he says, you can't technically have a deficit. So the silver has to come from somewhere. So they plug it in, meaning analysts. He's talking about analysts plugging it in. So they have to plug it in and they make up numbers. No one knows how much silver is being recycled. No one knows how much silver is going through the refineries. Now, this is where I got stumped, because some of you may know that First Majestic Silver, which is the company that Keith Neumeyer started here, this is Keith Neumeyer here. First Majestic Silver is actually a member of the Silver Institute. And again, the Silver Institute produces this data, and this is data that they produce annually. Yet he says that no one knows how much silver is really being recycled. Well, if that's the case, why are there numbers here? That's essentially my question. How do we know that the annual numbers that are being shown here from the Silver Institute are accurate? I'll actually leave that question to be answered by all of you in the comment section below. So let me know what you guys think. Where do you stand on this debate? Do you think that there is a silver shortage? Do you think right now, or do you think that there isn't one? So essentially, do you agree with Keith Neumeyer or do you agree with David Morgan? All right. Thanks again for watching this video. Really appreciate your time. Please give the video a like. Please subscribe if you're new. It's Black Bullion.